the military? What's your disability check per month?
$2,100.
What was your service?
I was a cook in the Army.
What was your disability?
PTSD, anxiety, and depression.
The trauma surrounding ground beef?
So that's Caleb Hammer. He has over 3 million subscribers just on YouTube alone, and today I need to talk about why he's wrong. Not because he's a bad person, but because he has a massive platform, an overly confident take, and a fundamental misunderstanding about what he's talking about. My name's Derek Diabas. I'm a Marine Infantry veteran, a VA accredited attorney, and I've represented tens of thousands of veterans in pursuit of their VA benefits. My job is to get veterans exactly what they're entitled to. No more, and certainly no less. I don't like fraud any more than Caleb does. But what Caleb is doing isn't identifying fraud. He's just deciding based on his vibes who looks like they deserve benefits, and he shares that with over 3 million people. So let's fix that. The system isn't broken, at least not in the way that Caleb thinks it is. He just doesn't understand what it does, why it exists, or how it works in practice. The first thing you need to understand is that VA disability compensation is not welfare, it's not Social Security, it's not workers' comp. Caleb and a lot of people watching this show seem to think it works exactly like Social Security disability, where you have to prove that you can't work. But that's wrong. VA disability compensation does one thing. It compensates for the average lost earnings potential caused by a disability you received from serving in the military. It doesn't calculate your actual lost earnings potential. It simply calculates the average lost earnings potential an average person would suffer from that particular disability. Think of it more like a combination of delayed medical malpractice and delayed workers' compensation. For an employer like the military that's legally exempt from OSHA, where you can't sue for medical malpractice, and you had no ability to say no to dangerous, dirty, or unhealthy work. And that's what the military is, and that's what this disability program compensates for. It's based on the average economic impact of that disability across the entire population, and that's it. Here's the thing about Caleb's pattern. He platforms people in financial distress and chooses his guests, and somehow every single veteran he's had on the show receives disability. Not one exception according to him, and he says this himself like it's some sort of gotcha. But if you look at his other guests, you've got OnlyFans creators pulling in 6 figures and crypto bros who turned a small stake into a large fortune, and he platforms those people with genuine curiosity. But a veteran with a service-connected disability who earned that rating through a federal evidentiary process, that's where his skepticism kicks in. And that's where the tone shifts, because that's where his clicks are. Every broken veteran gets interrogated by a YouTuber who's never laced up a pair of boots, yet every successful OF model and crypto bro gets platformed with praise. That's a sample size of 1. It's a sample he built himself. It's like only buying chocolate ice cream and concluding, based on what's in your freezer, that only chocolate ice cream exists. And on the numbers, he's simply wrong about the system. The fraud rate for VA disability, per the VA's own Office of the Inspector General, is less than 1%, with the overwhelming majority coming from healthcare providers seeking reimbursements they aren't entitled to receive. If you only film veterans who are poor and broken, you aren't exposing problems with the VA disability system. You're making a documentary about your own personal booking choices. Now, why does this even need to exist at scale? Well, because the military does things to people that no civilian employer could legally do or even afford to do. There's no OSHA, you cannot sue for medical malpractice because of the fairness doctrine. There's very few sick days, if any, and the medical care you have access to is limited and inadequate, to say the least. And you can be ordered to do things that would result in catastrophic liability lawsuits by any other employer. For example, I've had clients who were told to do neck bridges until the discs between their neck vertebrae basically exploded. I've had clients who swam in toxic runoff during training, clients who cleaned asbestos without PPE, clients who humped 80-pound packs on 20-kilometer marches monthly for years. No civilian employer who breaks their workforce at the rate the military does could survive the resulting litigation. VA compensation is the substitute for all of that. It is a deferred liability that the government accumulated over decades of making people do dangerous, risky things in defense of their country, both overseas and in training. Caleb frames VA disability as a scandal because, in his estimation, the program runs about $500 billion, or about 5% of the federal budget, and he might be onto something if his numbers weren't completely made up. The real number is about $152 to $184 billion, covering about 6.9 million veterans and survivors for compensation payments. That's roughly 2.2% of the federal budget. That's the deferred bill for what the country asked all those people and their survivors to do. And remember, we've been in some sort of armed conflict since the 1940s. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, South America, Iraq, Somalia, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq again, Afghanistan, Africa, the Philippines, the list goes on. Folks like Caleb and others love to put up a graph of the explosion of VA disability claims since 2001. Yet they never seem to account for what has actually happened since 2001, namely that we've had 2 wars in 2 different countries lasting decades, as well as scientific advancements in learning about the toxic effects of exposures like Agent Orange, burn pits, AFFF foam, PFAS, benzene, and other chemicals, and their disastrous effects on the long-term health in human beings. Let me explain how compensation actually works and how you receive compensation, because Caleb does a great job of making it sound like you just show up and collect a paycheck. That couldn't be further from the truth. There are basically 3 things you generally have to prove. One is that something happened during your service. An event, an exposure, a condition, an injury arose while you were in, or you have a service-connected disability. The second thing you have to show is that you have a current chronic disability you're dealing with right now. And the third is there must be a medical nexus connecting the two. A medical expert, typically paid for by the VA, not ChatGPT, has to say yes. This current condition is related to what happened in service. The VA schedules its own medical examinations. The federal fraud rate for VA benefits is less than 1%, and the VA's Office of the Inspector General tracks this. It's not a system that pays out on demand, and those that do defraud it are found and prosecuted quickly. There are bad actors in this space, but they're not the accredited attorneys, agents, or veteran service organizations that help veterans. They're the unaccredited third-party consulting companies that have no fiduciary duty, no ethical oversight, that use rubber-stamped medical exams and opinions to inflate veterans' ratings. One of these companies earned roughly $400 million in a single year, and that's more than every accredited VA attorney in the country combined earned in that same time frame. That's the target, not veterans, not attorneys, but unaccredited claims companies that exist only to defraud the American taxpayer by any means necessary. Now, there's 2 bills in Congress right now. There's the Guard VA Benefits Act and the PLUS Act. The PLUS Act is a terrible bill that, among other issues, would legalize the so-called claim shark model and create a 2-tiered system of accreditation that leads to further confusion and frustration for veterans. The fix for that is not lambasting veterans on a YouTube show. It's supporting the Guard VA Benefits Act, and I wholeheartedly support it. All Congress needs to do is allow accredited attorneys and agents to charge the same reasonable fee on initial claims that we can charge on appeals. This would open up competent, skilled representation to veterans as early as possible in the process and protect both the veteran and the American taxpayer. So in his show, Caleb hasn't just attacked all veterans. He's responded with genuine empathy to veterans who have disclosed military sexual trauma, somebody who never deployed, never saw combat, but whose life was changed by what happened to them in service.
We had VA benefits of $3,700 coming in.
Yeah, that would be the military.
Why do you have 100% disability?
Mine came from abuse.
Oh, I appreciate your honesty, and that's f***ed up.
And he got it right that time. But a different episode, a veteran cook with post-traumatic stress disorder gets ridiculed for having PTSD. And the difference between those responses is not the legal validity of the claim. Both claims could be completely legitimate. The difference is whether Caleb himself could personally visualize the harm. That is not a principled position on veterans' benefits. That's a personal assumption of entitlement based only upon whose suffering looks real enough to Caleb Hammer. And that's wrong. Training is dangerous. Training is deadly. From range accidents to parachute failures to car accidents and repetitive injuries from years of physical trauma, all of those are legitimate methods of receiving service connection for injuries. The law does not use Caleb's proposed framework, and thank goodness it doesn't, because it shouldn't.
There was a guy in the military, he gets 4,000 hours for the rest of his life as a cook because of hearing loss. We've had multiple guests admit that they got injured outside of their service, but because technically they were still in service, like it was off base and all this stuff, they get 100% disability forever now.
Oh my God.
Veterans deserve better than a finance influencer bro deciding on camera who looks injured enough for his taste to deserve the benefits Congress set aside for them. But when you only cherry pick the most extreme examples for clicks, it's no wonder why Caleb Hammer has such a distorted view of veterans' compensation. If you're a veteran watching this and you don't know what you're entitled to, find an accredited VA attorney, accredited claims agent, or a veteran service organization like VFW, DAV, American Legion, or your county veteran service organization, not a consulting company or a claim shark. And if you're part of Caleb's audience, now you know what the system actually does, how it works, and why it exists. It's not perfect, but it's certainly not what Caleb described.